The Kansas City Chiefs have won Super Bowl 57 over the Philadelphia Eagles in our season's finale. This is the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. I'm Adam Wright along with Justin Tucker and CJ Medeiros. So guys, a little bittersweet here. So the Super Bowl just ended, and as did the 2022 NFL season, meaning the next meaningful game we will be covering won't be until September, quite a while from now, but we are going to get you guys plenty of coverage throughout this offseason, including the summer, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we have a great show planned for you guys, so we're going to cover the Chiefs and the Super Bowl, obviously. We're going to hit on that holding call that the officials gave out late in that game. Patrick Mahomes' legacy as his achievements continue to stack up here. But we're going to start with the Super Bowl and give our general impressions. So the Chiefs won the Super Bowl over the Eagles, 38-35. Patrick Mahomes was the game's MVP, throwing for just 182 yards with 3 touchdowns on that high ankle sprain. So, guys, what are your thoughts?
CJ?
Well, obviously, we all picked the Eagles to win this.
Yeah.
Just up and down, they had a better roster. But, hey, Patrick Mahomes, got it done. Andy Reid obviously outcoached Nick Sirianni. And, of course, you have all those awful, awful Philly fans. They're like, oh, my God, the refs cost us that game. Oh, dear. Oh, cry, Eagles, cry. That's what I say. Now, I think Kansas City, obviously, they came out and they got punched in the mouth in that first half. But they rallied back and never punted in the second half, I believe, scoring on every drive. And that's just something that you really have to appreciate Mahomes and Andy Reid for, and how the defense stepped up. That O-line completely shut down a ferocious Eagles D-line. It seems like the Eagles DBs had no answer for people like Juju Smith-Schuster and Kadarius Toney. It's just plain and simple. Not only did Kansas City win, but I would argue Philly lost. Philly, don't blame the turf. Don't blame the refs. The finger should be pointed at yourselves. You were up by 10 at half. You had no business losing that game, and you choked. But everything aside, congrats to the Chiefs. They earned it, and we'll just see what happens to them going into the offseason, I guess.
All right, Tuck. Well, Tuck, you're muted.
Thank you. Where do I even begin? I could blame it on the referees because I know it's a flag, but in that sort of situation, you usually don't call it because the game's on the line and it's kind of a battle here and forth. And it's not really much of a pull. So I get why they called it, but again, I'm not going to blame them. I could blame the slip and slide field that they were on because, my God, it just felt like every time they tried to rush the passer, they were sliding for some reason. And it's not just the Eagles that felt it. It was also the Chiefs. But that defense, oh boy, they just kept sliding. I agree with CJ on this. I believe it is, and more importantly, the Eagles on offense and on defense. Jalen Hurts had an opportunity to, I want to say, gain a first down on 3rd and short. He fumbled the ball and then got returned for a touchdown. I'm not sure why that's not being brought up more, but that did happen. If you take away those 7 points, the Eagles are walking away as Super Bowl champions. But that's not what we're here to talk about, if, ands, or buts. The fact of the matter is, offensively, they didn't do enough to score. Defensively, they didn't do enough to win or hold the Chiefs because, my God, you guys had a 10-point deficit. You guys need to hold them sooner or later. In special teams, you guys lost that because you guys gave up one, I guess, the longest punt return in Super Bowl history, even though it wasn't a touchdown. It basically was because it set them up at the 5. Just overall, I think they just sort of kind of collapsed in the second half. I think the Chiefs made amazing adjustments. Patrick Mahomes showed you what he's made of. And I think overall, the Chiefs just played a better overall game than the Eagles did.
Adam, you're muted.
Jesus, 2 in a row, huh?
Uh-huh.
You want me to make it 3 next time? I could totally do that.
Please do, except do it for the rest of the episode.
Oh, wow.
This guy.
Especially later on, because I know we're going to get into it.
Yeah.
Listen, this game really proved that Patrick Mahomes is the real deal. And it's not just a flash in the pan these past few years. This guy, throughout the entire season, had, for his number 1 wide receiver, he had Juju Smith-Schuster. Then his number 2 option all year, you could argue Mecole Hardman, but it was mainly either him or Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Probably Scantling because he was healthier this year than Mecole Hardman ever was. And also Kadarius Toney. Those are all solid pieces, but it's not the type where your quarterback throws 41 touchdown passes with over 5,000 yards and wins the Super Bowl along with Super Bowl MVP with a high ankle sprain. I mean, this season so far for Patrick Mahomes was his Mona Lisa, because as great as it was his first year starting in the league, he had a lot of weapons around him. This year, he didn't have much, and down the stretch of this season, he was hurt. He was injured, and his wide receiving core around him was getting hurt constantly. This was Patrick Mahomes' best year to date. Not statistically, but still a great year. And I am very excited to see what the future holds for this kid. I really am. I wasn't the biggest fan of him before because I thought he was a little overhyped. Now I don't think it's fake anymore. This guy, we'll talk about him more in depth down the road. But to touch on the Eagles, they weren't able to generate as much offense as they wanted to. Statistically, they had a decent game. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both played very well. Jalen Hurts had a Jalen Hurts-like game. If they won this game, then he would have been Super Bowl MVP. Over 300 yards passing, 4 total touchdowns. I mean, that's a very good game. And I know he fumbled, and that was part of, those 7 points. You take those away, as Justin said, that is the difference in the game. But it was still a good effort. You're not going to be perfect. So the Eagles, they might be back in a couple of years. It's going to be tough to get back because teams who lose the Super Bowl, man, I don't know what it is about them, but something always goes wrong. But congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs. That's their second Super Bowl victory in 4 years. And Patrick Mahomes is now the 3rd youngest quarterback with multiple Super Bowls. And with his league MVP, he's the second. He's the youngest quarterback with multiple Super Bowl MVP with multiple MVPs. So great stuff all around for the Chiefs. Good effort by the Eagles, and it was a good game. And we'll talk about that holding call. This could be a good transition into our next segment, isn't it? Unless we wanted to. What's up?
Is it a dynasty? Is it a potential dynasty?
Not yet. They need to win. They need to win at least 3. I think they need to win 3. Go back to back. Win it next year.
All right, that's fair. Just making sure.
All right. So what do you think though?
I think no. I think 3 and 5 makes it a dynasty, not 2 and 4.
Right. They need to win 3, and they've been to the Super Bowl. They have been to the Super Bowl 3 times. And honestly, you can make the case if Mahomes' whole offensive line wasn't hurt for that game, it would have been a closer game and maybe possibly a different outcome.
No,
possibly.
No, their defense was still gashed the entire game.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because their offense wasn't able to stay on the field.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You think just having a healthier offensive line would have allowed them to win the game?
Yes.
You must not know math because the Chiefs didn't score double digits, I don't think.
No,
What was
right.
the score of that
They got the
game?
9.
Right.
Huh?
But a healthy offensive line is one of the more underrated things that you need on a Super Bowl winning team.
It was 31-9. So you're telling me
Yes.
a healthy offensive line is going to prevent Tampa from scoring 31 points?
If
It'll
you're
make
missing
it a
both
lot
of your
closer.
tackles, and your center wasn't able to practice for 3 weeks, then yeah, that's going to make a pretty big difference.
Okay, but you're not answering the question. I mean, I'm okay. So a healthy offensive line would have prevented Tampa from scoring 31 points. I got it.
I
Yes.
think he would.
Yes.
I think he's making it sound
No.
a lot closer.
Your defense is going to
Tampa's skills to score 31.
One at a
I'm
time.
sorry. It doesn't fix the fact that the Chiefs' defense that year was abysmal.
It was not that bad. It was
And
not
yet,
that bad.
here they are getting 31 points dropped on them in the Super Bowl.
Okay. Well, it's hard to play good defense throughout the entire game if your offense isn't able to stay on the field. It's going to be gassed throughout the field.
They had
throughout the game.
prolonged drives. Mahomes was literally making these great throws, just pulling them out of his you-know-where, and yet, I'm sorry, they didn't suffer that many 3-and-outs. They were going on drives and getting stifled just outside the red zone. And I feel like you're also discrediting that ferocious Tampa defense that hosted the likes of Levante David and Vita Vea and Devin White and Antoine Winfield and Jamel Dean and Shaq Barrett.
It's a good defense.
A healthy O-line, I don't think even still would have overcame that defense.
It's a good defense, but a better offense. And if they were healthy, then Mahomes would have had a lot more time to throw.
Still wouldn't have won.
We don't know that.
I'm not saying that it would have been a different outcome. I'm saying it's a possibility. If it's a close game, then it's anyone's game. Also, we're supposed to be recapping Super Bowl 57, not 55.
Um,
and yet here you are.
Let it go.
I just made a quick
sub
point.
We just won't agree on this.
I just made a quick sub point, CJ. But yeah, Philly blew a 10-point lead in this game, and the Chiefs were able to overcome had a great second half. So good stuff for them. I did want to change gears here. And so towards the end of the game, there was a holding call that has caused a lot of controversy in this Super Bowl. So we're going to touch on that. That's next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast. You are listening to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Adam Wright, CJ Medeiros, and Justin Tucker with you. All right, so there was, on the final drive of the game for the Chiefs, a holding call that, if it wasn't called, would have made the difference, at least in time in this game. So I'm looking for the exact play. So it was a 3rd and 8 at the Philadelphia 15. So there was a pass that was incomplete, and James Bradbury, there was a little bit of contact, tugged on Juju Smith-Schuster's jersey. The ball was borderline uncatchable. But there was a flag. James Bradbury, after the game, admitted that it was a flag, and he was just hoping that they wouldn't call it. But it was. So what do you guys think? Should the refs have swallowed the whistles on that one or no?
They got to call it. They have to call it. If If it's clear and they see it, they have to call it. Otherwise, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. As a football fan, I know we don't want it to end like that, and it hurts to see it end like that. But at the same time, the referees are paid to do what they're supposed to do. So if he sees the tug and it's clearly a tug and it's clearly a hold, then yeah, they did what they were supposed to. He made the right decision. He made the right call. It's unfortunate. Even the defender said, yeah, I did it. But at the same time, yeah, the referee did what he was supposed to. So no arguments here. He did the right thing.
All right, CJ?
So let's talk about what a holding penalty is. We all know players, what is it? Like within 5 steps of like the offensive line, you grab the jersey. That's what it was. That's what a holding call is. And they called it. To anyone who says it shouldn't have happened, I will ask you this question. Do you deny that it was a holding call? Do you deny that he held? And everyone knows it, but so yeah, if it was a hold, then the flag should come out. It's literally that simple. And if you say no, that's just because you care more about, the entertainment value. And I understand it, but if you say it's not a hold, then I just assume you're willing to sacrifice the integrity of the game for entertainment value, which isn't something I would do, but to each their own. And furthermore, I think it's funny how the actual players on the Eagles have accepted this fact, but their horrific fan base has yet to. James Bradbury himself said, I did it, and that's that. That's it. It's over. The argument's over. And you have Philly fans like, no, well, they still shouldn't have thrown it. That's a stupid excuse. And on a side note, you can't blame the field either. It's like, oh, the field was so slippery. I hate that argument. I do, because, Kansas City had to play on the exact same field. It's not like you were playing on 2 different fields. It affected you more than it affected Kansas City. And even their tight end, Dallas Goedert, said we can't use that as an excuse. So, yeah, the Eagles fans know it. The rest of the NFL knows it. But the Eagles fans don't. Your own team will admit it. And Philly fans, I think it's time you admit it too.
Okay. I'm glad I'm the only one who's going to say that shouldn't have been called.
Christ.
Because, listen, it's good that James Bradbury he held himself accountable. That's very respectable. And I'm not going to argue whether or not it was a hold based solely on that, because he was on the field. He saw it. But from what I saw, from what you could see on the computer monitor, it didn't look like there was that much contact. There was, but isn't football a contact sport?
It is.
It didn't look, and by the video, it did not look like the Juju was impeded on his route all that much. The ball was just flat out uncatchable.
Adam, I would like to inform you that whether or not the ball was catchable does not matter. On a hold, it does not matter. If it was pass interference, that's the only time whether or not the ball is catchable matters. If a catchable ball does not matter on a holding call, only pass interference. I'm not right. I'm just saying. So
I know.
Don't ever say like the ball isn't catchable, because it doesn't matter.
It just underscores how soft the call is, because it just shows how irrelevant it really is. Rule. Especially since he was really barely touched. Yeah, you could technically call it a hold.
Well, he had one hand in front of him, one hand grabbing the jersey. I would hardly call that barely touched. You can freeze a video at any point to cherry pick what you're trying to say, but
you don't need to
grab the jersey. I'm sorry, it happens.
You don't need to freeze the video at all. You can clearly see that he was not interfered with enough at all.
Except for the fact that he grabbed the jersey, which makes it a hold. You even said you're not arguing that it wasn't a hold. So why are we having this conversation?
Because it shouldn't have been called. You gotta swallow your whistles at that point. You can't just make borderline calls like that at that point in the game.
Can I point to the NFC
Kansas City still would have won. That's the thing. They were still that close. And, I'm sorry. And even still, they could have just kicked a field goal. the Eagles were pretty much cooked anyway. It would have taken a miracle.
There was a
I
minute.
really don't think
There
it
was a
had
minute.
that big of an impact on the game.
A minute 54 left in the game to get 3 points is hardly a miracle at all.
It's doable, but it's very hard to do.
That much.
What's that?
I said it wasn't even that much because Kansas City still would have had to kick the field goal and they would have had to return it. So it wouldn't even have been a minute 54.
It would have been like a minute 40 something if we're being honest.
It was going to be an incomplete pass, which stops the clock. Once you stop, and then once the ball is snapped, it only takes off about 4 seconds, which means
and then
you
they would have had to return it as well because Philly still would have done a squib kick.
That's if it's a squib. I'd rather them try to test the field before they actually, if you have a minute and some change left, you're not doing a squib.
All right,
in that situation.
Yeah, you're gonna be kicking that ball, and they probably won't return it just to save the time.
Oh wait, timeout. I don't think they had timeouts left. That's the issue.
They didn't. That's the thing.
So they can move the ball down the field, but it's very difficult. So they would have had like a minute 30, which is doable, but not the most ideal situation.
My point is, it really didn't have that big of an effect. I really don't think so.
I think it had a huge effect.
All right. So are you willing to look me in the face and say, without that call, Philly would have won? Because I still think Kansas City would have won regardless.
I think without that call, Philly has a very good chance, and that game wouldn't have been close to over. At that point, you throw towards the sidelines, and you just get yourself in a field goal range. You play for overtime.
Well, I mean, you can say that as much as you want, but it doesn't always work out that way.
It doesn't always work out, but at least you have a pretty good chance. To have well over a minute to the point where it's
Jack.
It doesn't. I didn't say guaranteed, but it's still you have a very good chance if you just, if that call is not made, Philly holds them to a field goal with just under 2 minutes left, and you have that much time to go down the field and get a field goal. It'll be a long field goal, but you can still do it. Just say. That's not a call that you make in the Super Bowl at that point in the game. That was a soft call, and that's the refs getting in the way of what wound up being a good Super Bowl, but could have been better if they just shut up. All right. I'm going to change gears here, and we're going to touch on Patrick Mahomes, and after this Super Bowl victory, where he stands among all the other greats at this point in his career and where he could go moving forward. That's next. You're listening to the Fumblerooski podcast.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football. They're saying it's a catch. It's caught! Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Swings it way down the field to Watkins! Sammy Watkins for the touchdown!
This is the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Justin Tucker, CJ Medeiros here with myself, Adam Wright. All right, so Patrick Mahomes has just won his second Super Bowl, and I just wanted, at his age, I just wanted to take a look at some of his accolades. So, two-time Super Bowl champ, two-time Super Bowl MVP, three-time AFC champ, five-time AFC championship appearances, 2 league MVPs, two-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler, and an Offensive Player of the Year nomination, twice throwing for 40 or more touchdowns. That ties Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Dan Marino, and Matthew Stafford for the most all-time. And then two-time, twice throwing for 5,000 or more yard seasons, tied for Brady with the second most, and he's just the third quarterback ever to have multiple seasons of 5,000 or more yards. He's the third youngest to win multiple Super Bowls, and tied for the Super Bowl, tied for the most Super Bowl MVPs by age 27, and tied for the most Super Bowl appearances for his age. So, guys, where do you think he stands all time right now?
That's a good question. Where he stands all time right now? There could be an argument for him. I think it's a little too early, but I think there could be an argument for him being top 10. With all the accolades that he has now, never missed the AFC Championship game, he's been to 3 Super Bowl, 2 Super Bowl rings, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, 2 regular season MVPs. There's a good, strong argument that he could be top 10. He may not have the accolades. He may not have all the accolades yet to make it like a super strong case for like top 5. But considering all that he's done in the postseason and in the Super Bowl, I think there's an argument for him to be top 10.
All right, CJ?
This isn't a question Adam and I have been talking about off camera, and I don't know if we are going to see eye to eye, but I've been thinking about it a bit. And I personally don't think so, but I would understand why someone does. I definitely think there's an argument. You know, I wouldn't say he's top 5. I would still say guys like Brady, Breeze, Montana, Rodgers, Elway, and Peyton Manning have an edge. But when it comes to pure accolades, not just statistics, but accolades at this point alone, I would argue he's maybe fringe top 10. And from a talent standpoint, he's definitely up there.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had a revelation. Then it just hit me. Good God, ranking quarterbacks is hard. Because, I mean, if you think about it, how does a guy like Mahomes stack up to Johnny Unitas, who was a Patrick Mahomes back in his time? We've had so many different eras of quarterbacks. You know, we've had at one era, we've had guys like Johnny Unitas and Otto Graham, Terry Bradshaw, Bart Starr. And then you move on and you got guys like Montana and Marino and Staubach. And now you got guys like Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, etc. I mean, Mahomes has the accolades, and I understand why people would think that he may be top 5. There's a lot of people saying that now. I personally don't think so, but it's just when you take into consideration all the different eras, it's darn near impossible, and it's a almost fruitless task to rank them. But I would say at this point he's not top 5, certainly about fringe-ish top 10. And I definitely think once he gets into his 30s and he gets more passing yards and passing touchdowns, it would be a much easier point to make.
So when I've taken a little bit of time to think about it after the Super Bowl, because we all have our overreactions after in the direct aftermath of when something happens. And as things have started to settle, if this guy were to retire today, he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Guess it depends on who else would be in the class.
Because
he's on the edge of first ballot.
Yeah.
I think so. Okay. Arguably a first ballot Hall of Famer.
A losing argument, but sure.
Now you could totally make an argument for it. I get it. Continue.
I can't. He doesn't have the yards yet, but I get it. No,
I mean, I hear you. I mean, I feel the same way, but there is an argument to be made. I won't deny it.
So because he doesn't have longevity just yet, he can't. There's an argument to be made against it. But just based off what he has done, what he can control right now, he's done everything along the lines to earn that trajectory. You know, he's one of just 3 quarterbacks ever with multiple 5,000-yard seasons. And his 2 league MVPs, that's more than Drew Brees ever had. mean, Brees had nothing. He relies on just his longevity and racking up all those 5,000-yard seasons. That's his case that he makes. And he was a dome quarterback, and he had lots of weapons for his entire career. Patrick Mahomes is bound to not have weapons at some point. He still kind of does because he has Travis Kelce, and Juju Smith-Schuster isn't horrible, but there's going to be a point where he has nothing, and we need to see how he does like that. His stats are going to be down. That's bound to happen. But if he still has like 25 to 30 touchdowns and he leads his team to a number 1 seed with that nothingness, then holy crap, this guy really is legit. As if he hasn't already proved it before. I mean, this is, like I said, this is to date his best year. When you have Juju Smith-Schuster as your wide receiver 1, and the only guy who you really have as a legitimate weapon being Travis Kelce, who teams could just look at and say, let's just double team that guy and we're set. And you still throw for 41 touchdown passes and win league MVP, that's special. That really is special. And I think this guy is destined for greatness. And when everything is all said and done, we could very realistically see this guy being in the top 2-3 quarterbacks to ever live. At least based on the trajectory. If he could absolutely, he could absolutely do nothing. Yeah. He could absolutely do nothing for the next 10, 15 years, and then we'll look at him the same way we look at Aaron Rodgers. But right now, he's done everything he needs to do to prove that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. And you can make a sub argument against a lot of all-time greats that Mahomes has better features than all the other guys. At least some of them. For example, Drew Brees. He has never won a league MVP, and he only has 1 Super Bowl victory under his belt. Patrick Mahomes has 2 and 2 MVPs. I mean, that right there, that's pretty impressive. So Mahomes, the sky is the limit for this kid. And the drafting around him on that Chiefs team, the coaching has been very good with Andy Reid. The sky's the limit. And he is in a very desirable environment to continue to succeed. And it looks like he has a good head on his shoulders. Maybe that changed. Maybe that changes. Maybe he gets a hit from Vontaze Burfict and he turns into a psychopath. But
don't jinx it. Don't jinx it.
He seems fine so far. So I'm very excited to see what this kid does down the road. But with that, I did want to change topics and head to our fan box. So as this season has come to a close, we wanted to ask you guys what your favorite part of the 2022 season was. We got a lot of good answers. We're going to touch on all of them next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football. They're saying it's a catch. This is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Swings it way down the field to Watkins. Sammy Watkins for the touchdown.
This is the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Adam Wright with CJ Medeiros and Justin Tucker. So we have reached the Fumblerooski fan box where we post a question filter on our Instagram every Monday, and you can respond with hot takes, questions, and more, and we will discuss it and give you a shout out on our podcast. Respond to next week's fan box question to be featured on our show. All right. So for the question of the week, it was, what was your favorite part of the 2022 NFL season? So lots of good answers, starting with, we got Dylan Powell, who said, they wrote me off I ain't right back game though. I ain't right back though game.
Geno Smith said the quote.
Now, Geno Smith had an incredible year. I mean, we have preached about it all season long, but I mean, what a surprise that was, right? And
Yeah.
I believe that was the game where they faced Denver, right?
Was it? I'm not sure if it was Denver or LA.
No, wasn't that the game against Denver? Where everyone thought Russell Wilson was going to go slaughter his old team led by Geno Smith, and Geno pulled an Uno reverse card?
Yeah. But hey, all of a sudden, Geno looked like that guy. So congratulations to Geno, NFL Comeback Player of the Year. Deserved it.
Yeah, so it was back in September, and it was against the Broncos. So he beat his former team. How cool is that? Well, not his former team, but the quarterback, the former starting quarterback for the Seahawks, who's been Geno Smith has been his backup for years for him. So he was able to beat them and also make it to the playoffs. Next was Grayson Mortimer saying, watching Dallas lose.
Oh, time-honored tradition. And Grayson, you are correct.
Every year, right before the NFC Championship game, it happens. And Adam's like, this can't keep happening.
Man. I keep saying it every episode that Dallas comes up. It has to happen at some point. They have to figure it out. It's not going to come anytime soon.
Probably after we're all dead.
Listen. When I saw Ezekiel Elliott under center, I knew the game was over.
I mean, we knew the game was over long before that. I mean, man, there were a lot of things that went wrong in that game for the Cowboys. But watching them lose is
hope. I thought maybe they could do something. No. Zeke went under center. No, as in like he was the center. I was like,
yeah, I remember that.
I can't believe it.
Joseph Sottle said Minnesota versus Buffalo, which is quite possibly the game of the year.
Yeah, I could see that. Oh my goodness, that catch from Justin Jefferson was insane, and Stephon Diggs made a sick catch too.
Oh my God, talk about a battle of the Titans. Two of the best wide receivers in football just exchanging unbelievable grabs.
Patrick Peterson showing flashes. Oh, that was a nice game.
Saying Odell Beckham Jr. who? Oh my God, those were better catches. Like those were just unbelievable.
Goodness gracious.
All right. Jad Noman said CMC 3 different touchdowns in one game.
Oh, that was nice.
And that was some sort of record, wasn't it? Because he threw a passing touchdown, he had a rushing touchdown, and a receiving one. So it was some sort of record, was it not?
It's happened before, but it's still a good accomplishment for a running back to do. Still, nice job, Christian McCaffrey.
And then he also said Jay Jet's Bills catch, which is the Justin Jefferson catch that we discussed.
Yep.
That was an incredible catch. I told you guys going into that year that he was the number 1 wide receiver. They called me a madman.
No, Tuck called you a madman.
Yeah, Tuck called me a madman, and probably other people. Because
honestly, I wasn't on that show, but I outright told you when I heard it that I agreed. So come on now.
I know. Owen Vanslack said Dolphins versus Ravens, game or Vikings second half comeback.
Just goes to show you that no lead is safe with Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
That was disgusting. He didn't deserve to play ever again.
Yep. And on top of that, a lot of Vikings fans were comparing that to the Super Bowl 51, saying, oh, every masterpiece has its cheap copy. And it shows the masterpiece with the Vikings comeback in the regular season against the Colts, who had 4 wins. And then it showed the cheap copy, which was they portrayed that as Super Bowl 51. Like, that's blasphemous. That's cute. That's cute. We have 6 Super Bowl victories.
I don't care.
We have 6 Super Bowl victories, but have your regular season victories.
Yeah.
Secret Weapon Consulting said Eagles going full Falcons in the Super Bowl. Cry, Eagles, cry. Listen.
Amen.
There's been a lot of blown 10-point leads, but a 25-point lead, that will never have that is not a cheap copy to anything. Like that ruined the Falcons organization for years to come.
It literally.
I mean, they made the playoffs the following year, but they still weren't the same. I mean, they weren't the juggernaut that they were the year prior, and they were a cellar dwelling team for the next few years after that. So yeah, but I mean, it was kind of a blown game, but the Eagles still played pretty well. They had a good game. Just they ran into a pretty good quarterback. Chris Kostic said the last 5 minutes of the Bills-Vikings game, again, like, incredible
just the whole game, to be honest.
Yeah, and that big comeback by, what was it, the Bills or the Vikings? I vaguely remember that game.
The Vikings.
So the Vikings came all the way back.
And then it went into overtime because the Bills proceeded to score a field goal, I believe. And then the Vikings scored, and then Josh Allen predictively threw an interception to Patrick Peterson.
Yeah. And then Brogdon Hill said the Vikings were down 33 points to the Colts and came back.
They should not have gotten away with that game.
That's the Colts for you. That's what happens when you have a NFL commentator as your head coach. That's what happens. As much as we love Jeff Saturday.
You got him in position, though.
I know.
If he won, he would have looked like a genius. But now he can't even play Saturdays no more, let alone coach.
And that's why he's not their head coach right now.
I think he kind of stepped down, didn't he?
He ain't having
No, they just hired the Eagles OC Steichen.
Right, but that's because Jeff Saturday stepped down.
Oh, please. Like, he was going to get hired again.
He wasn't.
Not
he was the interim.
Irsay was drunk again, which very well might have happened. You never know.
He was the interim head coach. There wasn't much to ask from him. Watching Ian Mulhern said watching Mahomes prove he didn't need Hill to win.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, that was impressive from Mahomes. For him to be able to do more with less, something that I preached about Tom Brady for years, that gave him the edge above anyone else at the quarterback position. That's something that Mahomes practiced this year, which was great. Isaac Zonana said the Dolphins. If that's the best thing, man, I get you're a Dolphins fan, but I mean, that season was a tragedy for you guys.
To his brain sure isn't the best thing. That much, I'll tell you.
You were 8-3. You were in contention for the number 1 seed, and people were looking at you as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And then you went on to lose 5 straight. I mean, that was just.
They still made the playoffs.
On top of it,
they still made the playoffs.
That was. I mean, if I'm a Dolphins fan, I look at this season as a tragedy.
Same.
I mean, oh man, that was a tough season for them. But Nick Norman said Kenny Pickett, as a Steelers fan, watching him grow was really refreshing. So yeah, I did not like the Kenny Pickett pick when they took him in the draft. I thought any quarterback, any team that takes a chance on these quarterbacks in the draft is just setting themselves up for failure. But Kenny Pickett, he did right, but he wasn't. Come on.
Yeah, I know.
Mr. Irrelevant. Were we looking at him as a draft prospect, saying, "Man, anyone who drafts Brock Purdy, man." But look, Kenny Pickett. I mean, the big takeaway from him is that he had small hands. It's like, which was a little stupid because it's like, okay.
They said the same thing about Joe Burrow, didn't they?
Yep.
And now,
although his hands are bigger, I guess his hands are bigger, but still, I mean, it didn't affect Joe Burrow. I mean, he's perennially now one of the better quarterbacks in football. But Kenny Pickett really did show some growth. And You can't see it in the stats, but you can clearly see that if he has a year or two to develop, then he could be a really good quarterback. At least a solid starting quarterback in this league. But we'll see. It's early. Sometimes it takes quarterbacks a couple of years to really hit their stride. But Brian Mucker said, when Justin Jefferson climbed the ladder. So another Justin Jefferson vote from that catch. And that season from him. No one talks about it really, but it was among the better single seasons a wide receivers ever had.
Yeah.
And it happened because it followed up Cooper Kupp's all-time great, like top 2 season ever. Like that happened last year in 2021. But no one talks about Justin Jefferson because of what Cooper Kupp just did.
Mhm.
But Eli Turner said Broncos finally scoring above 30 points. I'm sorry, that's so sad. Listen, it was a tough season for the Broncos, and I expected them to make the playoffs. I thought they had a playoff roster, and they still do. A couple things didn't go their way, some injuries, some coaching issues, play calling. Their quarterback seemed to get lazy at stretches, but after they fired Nathaniel Hackett, what they showed was pretty encouraging. They gave the Chiefs a run for their money, and they upset the Chargers, and Russell Wilson actually looked like Russell Wilson that we actually know. Like not the one that we've seen all this year, but for his entire career. He actually looked like himself, which was encouraging. So Broncos fans, you might have something to look forward to.
Okay.
Floodster Sports Zone said 27-0 comeback. So he is a Jaguars fan. So
I'm surprised the coach didn't get fired.
He probably should have.
There should have been heads rolling for the Chargers, and they fired their offensive coordinator, but Brandon Staley stayed.
Yeah, no, don't fire the play caller, the actual guy responsible for it. That would be silly. Chargers.
But, I also think part of what is wrong with the Chargers is not just coaching. It's not just their ownership and, the play calling, the coaching staff. And it's not even necessarily the personnel. It's the fact that it's always getting hurt. Have you noticed that? Like their wide receiver core is almost never healthy. And when they are, they're either not 100% or it doesn't last long. It seems it's just odd.
Well, then they should find their strength and conditioning coach. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, some players are just their bodies are made of glass.
Yeah, that's true.
So, the players they've invested in, they've drafted well, they've drafted good players, but they're getting hurt all the time. And if your most reliable player to this point is a running back, and running backs notoriously have issues with health, if they don't now, they will down the road. You're not setting yourself up that well.
Yeah, that's true.
But on the Jaguars side, what a great future they have. That is they have the quarterback of the future. Their offensive line is keeping it's keeping Trevor Lawrence alive. And they have pretty good weapons to throw to. Now, they got them all from free agency and trades, but they're not old, and they're pieces that have actually helped Trevor Lawrence in his development as a professional athlete. So good stuff going around there. Travis Etienne is one I haven't mentioned yet either. And that defense is young and continues to get better. They need to draft more probably, but looks good. Looks good. I just hope Trayvon Walker isn't a bust for where he was picked. Jesus.
He probably will be.
Yeah, what a waste of a number 1 pick. You could have had Aiden Hutchinson right now.
I said that when he was drafted.
Well, you got to give it time. Maybe Trayvon Walker will pan out. He has the athletic abilities, as you could clearly see, which attracted all of the NFL during the combine, but we'll see. All right. Well, that was the last of our talking points. You guys have any other thoughts before we end the show tonight?
I'm good.
Nah, just one.
Yep.
This isn't something I even want to discuss. I just want to do my due diligence and point out that the Philadelphia Eagles have officially lost both of their coordinators to head coaching jobs.
Yeah.
And if you fancy yourself a contender, this is the part where, you got to roll with the punches. Because, as Pats fans, we basically lost a coordinator like every other year.
Yep.
So I'm just saying.
Yep. It'll be an offseason full of different storylines. It's been crazy the past few off seasons, so I really can't wait to talk about it. And we will be with you guys every step of the way. Starting on Friday, where we are going to give our full offseason preview, free agency, the draft, even the combine, all of that stuff. And we will take you all the way through the summer, just as we always do. So sit tight. You guys will have plenty of football coverage as long as you are loyal to our Fumblerooski podcast. But with that, that'll do it for us tonight. Thank you for listening to us. We have new episodes out on Tuesdays and Fridays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also have all our episodes available on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and so much more. Also, be sure to follow our Instagram at Fumblerooski_podcast to keep up with our podcast and the latest coverage on the NFL. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Over and out.